what is the correct tempo to be practicing something at, especially if we're looking to increase our speed? As many of you may know, I am not the greatest shredder, I'm not the fastest player in the world, unlike seemingly everybody on YouTube these days. So this is something that has been personally interesting to me for a very long time. I have also never felt like I could become a shredder because I seem to have tried the things that have been recommended to me, the conventional wisdoms that are passed on, and they just never worked. Whenever I would ask somebody, how do you get faster? They'd give me one of two answers. The first one, which I think is the most common thing people hear, is simply start at a slower tempo with whatever you're working on, and then increment with a metronome the tempo upward. Eventually, you'll arrive at your goal tempo and you'll be a faster player for it. The second piece of advice I received a little later in my playing career when I was at university, and it was to play things at extremely slow tempos, like 30 beats per minute, 25 beats per minute, or even less. And the idea there was to learn how to relax your body so you could become a fast player and develop that sense of ease. Now, that gave me some extra things to work on and did improve my musicianship, but it did nothing to make me a faster player. So I've always kind of felt a little bit lost here, and like there must be another way, because there's evidence, as we see shredders in the world, that this can be done. People play quickly, but for some people, it just seems impossible to get there. But before we get into that, it is also good to remember that good practice habits are not the only thing that will contribute to you becoming a good musician. Something that is often overlooked, especially more and more these days as more of our lives are lived online, is the element of community. Having a group of people who are in a similar state of mind and learning the same thing as you is really beneficial for exposing you to new things you maybe didn't know about and pushing you to better yourself. So if you are looking for a community like this, then definitely check out our Discord, the ever-growing group of people who are learning 8-string guitar and who are wanting to share information to make our experiences all that much more rich. Be sure to also sign up for the email list down below where you can hear about community events and meetups. I promise that I do not send that many emails throughout the year. My only goal is to help connect you with other people to enrich your community. I'm willing to wager that if you have gone on your own search to figure out how to get faster on the guitar, you have been told or have read somewhere that the way to do it is to slow down the tempo of whatever you're working on and then increment it back up to your final speed. So if I was working on a sweep picking pattern, for example, and I wanted to get it to 160 beats per minute, then I would try maybe to play it. See that I couldn't, and then slow it down, let's say at half speed to 80 beats per minute. So here's 80, and now I'm going to go. Okay, and then I feel I can do that pretty comfortably. Let's speed it up. I'll go maybe up by 5. Still pretty easy, and I continue this process until I eventually hit a wall somewhere. Right, and then it starts to get sloppy, and then maybe I would spend some time around that tempo, slightly lower then, to work on this technique to see if I can push it up. But the idea is that you find your wall, and then you work close to that wall, and over time, push that wall bit by bit until you hit your tempo. This kind of works, but it's never actually worked for me to get fast, or what many people would consider to be fast. I have more often than not gotten stuck at about 75% speed for things that I consider actually fast. You know, my 16th note speed usually caps out around 130 beats per minute, and then it just falls apart. And I've heard similar stories from other people out there, including a lot of my students. So what is the problem? Why does this not work? In theory, it should. You know, we take something and we just are slowly, like incrementally bringing it up to tempo where no jump is too large. There shouldn't be any shock to the system trying to play faster at any point. Well, the reason that it doesn't work is because kinematically and neurologically, playing at slow tempos is fundamentally different than playing at fast tempos. So what do I mean by that? Well, firstly, the kinematics or the movements are going to be different when you play something slowly versus quickly. So let's take, for example, a pair of hammer-ons. Okay, when I do that slowly, I have a lot of time to get my arm into the correct position, to feel the weight moving between each finger, and I can really do it exactly as I want to and get each note kind of separated in time and in my mind. If I was to try to play that same thing quickly, it doesn't feel the same. I'm not thinking of the 3 notes now squished together, or if I were to extend it, 6 notes squished together. I think of that as one movement. You know, it's one gesture. So the muscle groupings change. We can no longer individually control each finger. We have to group them into one motion. Neurologically, there's something different going on as well. The time to think changes as we speed up. So again, if we go slow, there's a lot of time to think about the sound that's coming out of my instrument, to think about the placement of my fingers and to adjust them if they don't feel quite right. There's a lot of time for that feedback response. We can take this kind of longer neurological route in our brain to do what we want to do. But as we speed it up, we don't have time to think about all those things. We have to actually just think about the one movement, or kind of the general gesture again of what we're trying to play. This is why when you ask professional musicians or people who can play very quickly, what notes did they just play? Or, hey, what did you just do there? They have to stop and think about it. They go, oh, hold on. Let me think and figure it out again. Because they actually don't know. They're not thinking of all the notes they're playing. They're just thinking of the larger gesture. Now, if you're wondering where I am getting this information from, there is a fantastic podcast I'll recommend on Bulletproof Musician. On it, they talk to Dr. Jason Solomon, who goes over the neurological and cognitive sciences that he has in his background that led him to these discoveries and framing things this way. So if you're looking to get into the science and what is backing up these claims, then definitely check those links out. I'll put them in the description down below. There's also a great introductory video to this concept by Jason himself. So we shouldn't completely discard this idea of slowing down a passage to practice it quite yet, but we should question its efficacy in increasing our speed on our instrument. So we'll get back to it a little bit later and how to more effectively use it. But for now, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of practicing at extreme slow tempos, like sub 30 beats per minute. This was something that was recommended to me by some university professors when they saw maybe something that was keeping me back from playing quickly was tension. I was holding a lot of tension in my hands and body, and I would just tighten up when I would try to play fast, so they thought, let's get you to play very slow to get what it feels like to play with no tension. This, as you can probably imagine, didn't actually get me to be able to play faster. But it did do some unexpected things that nobody really told me when I first started working on it. Firstly, it really helped develop my internal sense of time. If you notice with those really long spacings between clicks, there's no kind of hand-holding as to where the tempo is. We don't recognize patterns that slowly anymore. So what do we have to do? We have to subdivide. So during that whole exercise that you just heard me play, I was subdividing which are 64th notes, I believe. So I'm really counting all that space in between and learning how to feel that inside of myself. And then every time I get to another click, it's a feedback mechanism to see if I've been speeding up or slowing down, depending if I played my note before or slightly after the click. So internal time is developed with this exercise. It is also something that is very useful for detecting any tension in your body. Because we're playing so slowly, there's a lot of time to think and feel and notice. When you're just having one finger on one note for 3 whole seconds, you can really kind of detect if your shoulders are up here nice and tight, or if your toes are curled, or maybe your neck is turned and it's getting uncomfortable. You're going to find that stuff pretty quickly, and then you can work on getting rid of that and relaxing. Finally, it is also a very useful tool to practice intention. This exercise is more like meditation than any other guitar practice I've done before. It really forces you to focus on the sound you're creating, every individual feeling of playing your instrument, and how the instrument feels on your body. So if you're looking to develop that connection and just looking to develop a sense of focus during your practice, this can be very useful. So slow practice, very useful, but not for our current goal of playing quickly. So if those are not the answers for getting faster, what is? Well, the idea is quite simple. It is simply practice at the tempo that you are looking to play at. Essentially, play fast to get better at playing fast. Now, it is not so simple as turning on the metronome at your desired goal tempo and then just starting to try and play. That is probably not going to yield good results, and you're going to be messy still. So what are the tools that we can use? Well, it goes by a few different names. In my own world, I call it chunking or burst practice, but sometimes people will call it chaining, like in that podcast that I mentioned earlier. So chaining or chunking or burst practice, whatever you want to call it, involves taking small pieces of whatever you're trying to play and then expanding upon those at your desired tempo, rather than playing the whole thing at a slow tempo and increasing that. So let's take an example of that sweep picking pattern that I was working on earlier and see what this would look like in practice. There are 3 primary ways you can work on this. So I have my goal tempo of 160 beats per minute here, and I legitimately don't think I can play this example this fast. So the arpeggio I'm going to try to do is a 5-string sweep of a G major. And I'm going to be trying to do it at 16th notes. So digga 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 da. So it's not really there right now. I can keep trying to force it, but it's messy and I can feel it's not coordinated, it's not going to happen. So let's start by doing our chaining method, starting from the front. We're going to take the first note and just play it by itself. So right now I'm just getting in my body this idea of a singular event. So when the sweep happens, it's one motion. Once I'm comfortable with that, I add the second note. And I can stay here as long as I want until it starts to feel comfortable and it feels like I get the proper pick motion that I want and my fingers are working kind of in tandem together at that speed. Then I'll add the third note. Fourth note. And so on and so forth. So I did that for 2 or 3 minutes there. I cut out the pieces where necessary so you don't have to sit through all of that. But you can see I pretty much got it by the end. It's not perfect yet, and I would continue to work on this over the next few days if maybe I had to perform it or it was part of a song I was working on. But I got it pretty quickly, and I promise you I didn't practice that earlier. But how much less painful was that than taking it from 120 beats per minute and incrementing it by 2 or 3 beats per minute every few times? It took so much less time. And I also did not develop any of that stress and anxiety that comes when I hit the wall of the tempo, where things start to kind of cohere into one event rather than being able to think about all the individual pieces of it. So I'm going to show you the 2 other primary methods of practicing with chaining, but there are more. So I will recommend again going to check out Dr. Jason Solomon's podcast interview where he goes over them in a little more detail. So our second way is to do the same thing that we just did, but rather than starting on the first note and adding the notes after, we're going to start on the final note and add the notes before. So in this case, let's say this note on string 4, is my final note before my pattern repeats. So I'm just playing that in time, getting used to that sound happening in that place of the beat. Then I'm going to add the note before it. And the one before that. And the one before that. And so on until I reach the beginning of the passage that I'm working on. And finally, the third way is kind of the problem area focused way to practice chaining. So let's use a different example for this one. I'm going to look at this kind of line that's just a major scale. 3 notes per string that starts on string 6. Let's say I'm trying to get that a little faster, and the problem area is going to be when I have to change strings between string 5 and 4. I keep getting my pick slipping up there when I'm trying to do my double downstroke with my economy picking. So what I'm going to do in focusing on the problem area, we're going to start with those 2 notes. Just that strings change, because that's the worst part. And From there, we're going to build out in both directions. So I'm going to add the note before and the note after. You get the idea. So the beauty of this method, in my opinion, is that it teaches you right away what it feels like to play quickly. There is no transition phase or wall you hit where your slow practice technique no longer scales up to a fast speed. And I can say from personal experience that this has also worked for me. I employed this practice methodology when I was working on my monomyth cover about a year ago. A lot of those sections are very quick, especially the beginning of the solo that Tosin plays, and not being a shredder, I couldn't do that. So I had to kind of force myself and push myself to hit that quick tempo, and I felt because I wanted to make a video, I had a time pressure on myself, and I had no time to slowly increment it up. So I jumped in at fast tempos, and it worked. I was able to play that line for the cover. So I know this works, and I know it's a lot less painful and it's more enjoyable than doing this incremental increase of tempo practice. So I hope you give it a try, and if you're looking for some guidance on how to do it, then definitely reach out to me. I do offer private lessons, and I would be happy to help you figure out how to employ this in your practice regime. Now, there are a few more things to talk about when it comes to how to use a metronome effectively in your practice, but we're going to save that for another video. So make sure you stay subscribed if you want to be notified when that comes out, and otherwise, that's all I have for you today. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, happy practicing.